comes to pass, penetrating and perfect Dharma is rarely met with, even in 100,000 million kalpas. Having to see and listen to, remember and accept, I vow to taste the truth of the Tathagata's teachings.
In Buddhism, when Zen practitioners share their understandings of the teachings and practice, it's offered on the basis of dana paramita. Dana is a Pali word that means generosity or to give freely, and this is done without the expectation of anything in return when the opportunity arises. And those who share the teachings at Great Tree do so on a dana basis, so please support their practice by giving what you can. You can go to greattreetemple.org and hit the support button on the upper tab. Our speaker today is our abbess, Rev Teijo Munnich. Daiju Teijo means Great Tree Right Stillness. Rev Teijo is a disciple and Dharma heir of Rev Dainin Katagiri. She studied with him from 1975 until his death in 1990, receiving formal training at Hokyoji in Minnesota, Tassajara Zen Mountain Center in California, and Hosshinji Sodo in Obama, Japan. Rev Munnich was ordained as a Zen priest in 1981. In 1983, she began to envision a practice center and community, and at its heart, a residential practice for women, which came to be Great Tree Zen Women's Temple, which was incorporated in 2004. And the title of her talk today is Growing the Spirit of Great Tree, which is a continuation of a talk that she gave a couple of weeks ago.
Did everybody hear that online? Oh, Linda isn't showing herself. Okay, well, nope, we got a thumbs up. Thank you. Sorry, I am just getting my voice back. Last Saturday I woke up and opened my mouth and nothing came out. So, good morning. First I want to show a picture. Actually, I've been thinking about this talk as looking back and going forward. I guess I forgot to give it that title, but that's what I was thinking of. And but I first I want to show you a picture of where I think Great Tree is right now. Just a second. This is it. It's the little one on the right. So we came across a quote in our study group yesterday from Christina Feldman's book on the Four Immeasurables called Boundless Heart. And right now we're on the first immeasurable called metta. Metta means loving kindness. And the others are compassion. It's not just joy, it's sympathetic joy. Thich Nhat Hanh says that means to see others' joys as our own. And the fourth one is equanimity. But what she says in the particular section that we were reading yesterday is, if you want to know about your past, look at your mind now. If you want to know about your future, look at your mind now. And I think that's really to the point. But when I was thinking about my mind now, I was thinking about Great Tree now. I was thinking, in some sense, it helps both to understand what has already happened by way of creating this temple and creating this practice, and also that understanding can inform the future And yes, both point to what is happening now, which, as I say, I think we have created some roots, like in this picture on the right. See, the little tree is kind of being laughed at by the big tree, but it always was my intention when I first was thinking about it. It was called the Women's Practice Center for many years until I moved here and decided to start it here. But one of the things that I started to write was a book called The Three Little Pigs, and thinking about Great Tree as the third pig, which maybe it took a little longer to build his house, but it was very strong. And that's the way I've always thought about Great Tree. And also Sangha, the Sangha of Great Tree. I was thinking about that this morning, and I was thinking about how big the Great Tree Sangha is if we count all the people that have either lived here or practiced here over the last 20 years. The Sangha is very big. One of the things that occurred to me as I was thinking about this was the value of thinking about history. And a couple of people have approached me within the last couple of years and said, we want to write a history of Great Tree. Actually, someone approached me 20 years ago and said, we want to take this on as our project. They were at a college in, I can't remember the name of the college, in South Carolina. And it's a women's college. And that never happened. And so over the years, people have said, we want to write a history. And my experience of that is in 1978, Minnesota Zen Center bought a piece of land, 280 acres of land, beautiful, beautiful land in southeastern Minnesota, to build a monastery. Katagiri Roshi really wanted a monastery. But the land didn't have anything on it by way of buildings. It had a lot on it, but it was a section of land that was right next to a big forest. And Katagiri Roshi said, now we have the land. Now, we didn't actually, we were paying for it for several years, but so we didn't actually own it. But he said, now we found the land. Now, let's wait 10 years. In 10 years, we can start practicing here. But we were all young and very eager. So we said, oh no, we can do it now. So we got a big army tent and packed our stuff. It was about 3 hours from Minneapolis. And we went down there and had our first sesshin in October. And those of us, that were city folks, which was most of us, weren't as in touch with the weather as someone who might grow up closer to the elements. So it was the first freeze, the first hard freeze in Minnesota is in October. It's usually the beginning of October. Sometimes it comes in December. So we're all down there, in this big tent, in our hats and scarves and jackets and socks. And of course, Katagiri Roshi was there with his bare feet and bald head. But, people serving. We have a picture of one of the priests serving with a hat and gloves and serving a meal. But we were so eager, we just kept doing this. We had practice periods down there when the weather was manageable, and lived in tents. The army tent was our meditation hall. We had a kitchen tent, and we were really, really wanting to get this place paid for and built so that we could live down there. And it really didn't happen in Katagiri Roshi's lifetime. We did get the land paid for. But I remember that feeling of, we got to do this, we got to, and we looked at Japan and looked at all the things that he brought Japanese teachers in, and everything, and all the refinements of the practice. So we were all very eager. And then in 1983, Katagiri Roshi wanted me to go to Tassajara. And so I was at Tassajara for a year, and in the summertime, it was a guest season from April 1st to Labor Day. And in the guest season, you had to kind of watch the guests because there was no electricity there. We used oil lamps for light. And so they needed someone each day to go along, all along all the cabins and check to make sure that people's lamps weren't flaring up. And because, as you know, right recently, as some of you probably know, the second meditation hall just burned down at Tassajara to the ground. So it's very susceptible to fire. California gets very dry. So they needed someone every day to be on fire watch. And when you were on fire watch in the summer, thank you, it meant that you also needed to sleep in the gatehouse. There was a small little building called the gatehouse. Whoever was on fire watch that day, after they'd checked all the cabins, had to go and sleep in the gatehouse. And of course, if you were in the gatehouse, you missed evening zazen. You had the whole evening to yourself. And so I was sitting in the gatehouse the first time, and I found some journals, a huge collection of journals. And I started reading them, and they were journals that were kept every day from the very beginning by the director. Every day they had to make some journal entry. And that was very interesting to me. I went way back to the beginning and saw over the years, Tassajara had been around for, I don't know, maybe, I guess it opened in the 60s, so maybe almost 20 years at that time. But at that time, it was, everything was so smooth and everything was so perfect. And us folks out in Minnesota, we're still living in tents at our practice periods. And so, that was kind of what we were aspiring to. We wanted to get the place built, paid for and built, and have our teacher teach there and have all this, have it really a working monastery. But it wasn't happening because we had Minnesota Zen Center, City Center to take care of, and our monastery, Hokyoji. But as I read these journals, I saw, wow, it doesn't just happen overnight. There's a whole struggle that happens to get a monastery up and running. In their case, they had a lot of money, so they had buildings already there. They bought a resort, basically. And but we didn't have that kind of money in Minnesota, and so we were still struggling to pay for it. But it gave me a lot of perspective, and I went back to Minnesota saying, it takes time. We need to be patient. That same year when I was at Tassajara, I was heavy into reading Thomas Merton, because they had a whole shelf of Thomas Merton in the library there. And I read a book called Waters of Siloé, which is not one of his most well-known books. But what it is the head of the monastery in Gethsemane in Kentucky, asked Merton to go back and translate all of the journals from the time that the Trappists began in France, which was right around the French Revolution. So, which was, I guess, in the 1700s or something. Anyway, or I don't know when the French Revolution was, I guess. But he did that. He grew up in France because his parents were artists and they were from the United States, but they lived in France, and so he was very fluent. So he went back and he wrote this history. And that when the priests or the monks first came to the United States, he wrote a history of Gethsemane. They were struggling just to survive. Some of them didn't survive because they didn't have anything except land. And the ones that bought land up north didn't survive because they didn't realize how cold it would be. But the ones in Tennessee, they managed to survive. And what he talks about is generation after generation. We just had this mountain seat ceremony here in September. And Ejo, when he was telling us about it, oh, I don't have stop share. He probably read all my notes. he was, how did I start that sentence? Ejo, when he was talking about, thank you, when he was talking about the mountain seat ceremony, he said it was like a bonsai plant that he had seen that he thought was really beautiful and was very attracted to. And he said he noticed when he was sitting with it that it had a list of names on the left. And he realized that that was all of the people who had taken care of that bonsai plant. And he said a mountain seat ceremony is to carry on that lineage. It's to pass on the care of the temple from one person to another. And that our mountain seat ceremony, because Great Tree was just started, was the beginning of that lineage. So that's a very significant thing in the life of a temple. We're saying we want to have a lineage that will take care of this temple. And so I was seeing that was what happened. In the Benedictine tradition, which the Trappists are Reformed Cistercians, which are Reformed Benedictines. Benedictinism was the first monastic practice in the West, and it's different from Eastern monastic practice because Eastern monastic practice is based on a teacher-student relationship, a master-disciple relationship. But Benedict had observed that, and he felt that it wasn't working so well. So he could set up a more kind of democratic system. And so in that system, the prioress or abbot or abbess is elected by the community. And the elections used to, I think they've changed it now, but they used to be just at large, that people would everyone in the community would vote. And then the top 5 or something would be voted for again by the entire community. And then there was also a council that was voted, a 10-person council. So, and in the Benedictine system, they change abbots every 6 years, abbots and abbesses. So you get all these different personalities depending on kind of the feeling of the community at that time. When I was at the Benedictines, there were 500 nuns at the convent. So 500 people were voting for the abbess, for the prioress. And so it takes on all these different flavors. of what is needed at that time, how the temple needs to be taken care of at that time. I was reading, when I was reading that too, I also struck by how things change within a temple, and how, in the beginning, it's a kind of a struggle just to get the roots down, just to get the tree planted, just to get the temple established, and it doesn't usually happen in one generation. Then, when it's there, the next person can pick it up and fill in what is needed. And I think that's why I like this election system so well, because it's the feeling of the community. So when I go back to the convent now, I see all these nuns that I knew when I was there, who, since I had left, which was over 50 years ago, have all been prioresses. Many of them have been prioresses. Not all, obviously, because there's still quite a few nuns there. And I think about all their different personalities. Some of them are very good at, taking care of finances, for example, or taking care of administrative things. And some of them have a very, very deep practice, but don't know the first thing about administration. And they're just all these different kinds of people that get elected, and you can be elected more than once. There was this one nun that was elected for 3 or 4 terms, and now there's kind of a shrine to her there. She was so loved. Apparently, she had a lot to bring to it. But in the beginning of the convent in Minnesota, it's South Dakota. When I went back 50 years later, after I left, in 2016, I discovered that a few years after I left, there was a history written, and that history was written from letters. The first nuns that started this convent came from Switzerland. Letters back and forth, and from articles, lots of things. This nun pulled together this history. After 100 years, it had been there 100 years at that time, and there were 3 nuns that were sent from Switzerland that actually ended up starting this particular convent, which, when I was there were 500 nuns. It had already broken off at least once, maybe twice, because in the Benedictine tradition, you can't have more than 500. So when they get to 500, they start a new one. That much. Just a second. Maria's note taker wants to come in. Sneaky. And when I look at that history, and these first women that came, first they were invited to Missouri by a priest who wanted to, who needed help with Catholic women and just with all the things that they were doing in 1867, whenever that was, 1870. But then they left. They kind of split off. There were 5 of them to start with, and they had a disagreement about how to do it, so 3 of them left. And they went up to North Dakota first. They were teaching they were being paid by the government to teach the Native Americans. Then the government said separation of church and state, and the nuns were out, and then they had to find a new place to live. And they were begging for food. Just this whole history of the struggles that they went through. And of course, by the time I was there was a huge convent, a college, a hospital, all run by these nuns, and several elementary schools scattered throughout the Midwest. So one never knows, what what will come of these, what seem like very small efforts. But when I think back to our history, we started with this seed that I talked about last time, that we planted before we ever had a building, in a pot. And that was supposed to be the seed of Great Tree. We had a big ceremony around it at the end of a sesshin. And I put it out in the sun, and one day a squirrel took away the seed. And I thought, this is not going to work. But it was already had some momentum. And we had a board, and they were very enthusiastic. And about a year and a half and $150,000 later, our board fell apart. This is kind of the history. And when our board fell apart, I was like, oh no, should I give up? And I thought, well, if I give up, I'm going to be on my deathbed, which saying I should have tried harder. So I took the next step. I kept taking a step. People came along, picked up the ball, and ran with it. I wonder how many boards have fallen apart in the life of Great Tree. And yet, everyone was its own little sangha. It's like we've had all these mini sanghas, not just boards, but people who have come, residents who have come. I can count at least 25 residents that we've had for 2 months or more. Chimyo was here for 10 years. We have a history. And we have this moment. And we are looking towards the future. This year I will be 80 years old, and I know that I can't continue forever. And everyone is aware of this, and so it is on our mind, how are we going to continue? So one thing I'm very excited about right now is that the board is planning to do a strategic planning. Now we've done, this will be our 4th one, and each time they'll get a little more expansive and more inclusive. You do a strategic planning partly, I think, each time I learn, to see where you are, see what has worked, see what maybe you can set aside, and that informs how to go forward. And all of these strategic plannings have helped us because it's helped us think in these ways. But this one I feel is at a very, very important time. It's at a time when we have to start considering transition. And of course, I've been thinking about this for a while. And it's not a simple thing. And I talked about this last time in terms of faith. But faith cannot exist alone. It has to have some sort of vision. It has to have something, some sort of, at least an envisioned structure going in a particular direction in order to stay alive. I once asked Katagiri Roshi, what is ego? And I expected him to say, ego is this terrible thing that we all have to get rid of. But he didn't. He said, ego is our life force. And I've thought about that a lot. And what it means to me is the things that we aspire to, the things that we believe in, the way that we have constructed our understanding of what the world is, can help us understand how to go forward, how to survive going forward. And he said along with this, he said, if we have to have something we have to have a goal, we have to have a vision, we have to have something that we're going towards. And it's never going to be what we think it is, but we still have to keep going in a certain direction. And I can say that for me, the vision of Great Tree includes what I've experienced in my own practice at Minnesota's monastery at Hokyoji, at Tassajara, which was a more refined kind of practice by the time I got there, at Hosshinji in Japan, which was a very refined kind of practice because it's been around Zen has been in Japan for a couple hundred years, or more than a couple hundred years, like what, from about the 8th century or something, and has really become part of the culture, and not just Zen but Buddhism. All of these experiences came into my vision. I started out, as most of you know, I had this vision at lunch at Tassajara one day. It was an informal lunch called the bag lunch on our day off. And I had this thought, I need to start a women's practice center for various reasons, and I can give you the history of that someday. But this was in 1983, and I thought, I'm not ready to do this. And I said that for many years, to the point where we didn't actually start doing something till 2001. But during those years, I kept saying to myself, I don't want to get too exacting about the way that I envision this, because I know I will be frustrated and disappointed if I have some idea. But that's not possible, really. I kept thinking, well, I want this, or it should be this way, And some of this was also based on my experiences in the convent, in the Catholic convent. So all of these things kind of informed this vision. And even though I didn't think that I had some particular idea about what it should be, there were little threads that kind of wove their way into the vision. And one of them was to try to continue the spirit of the practice that I experienced in a very traditional monastery in Japan. There's something about the tradition, something about those things that have been kept and practiced, that I felt elicited a particular spirit that I didn't see in American Zen. It wasn't part of American culture. And I didn't know exactly what that was. But I went to Japan, partly, I went for many reasons, but part of my reason was to see if I could kind of sort out what Katagiri Roshi had shown us that was Japanese culture, and what was tradition that had been woven into Japanese culture and into Japanese monastic practice, particularly, that had a spirit that had been kept, the traditions had been kept, maybe the rituals or whatever, for many hundreds and hundreds of years, not just in Japan, but in China and from India. What about that was genuine? When I was reading Thomas Merton, I remember thinking, now I need to go back to the beginning and read all of his stuff. Because when I was a Catholic, I was dabbling in with Merton and his later stuff. And I went back to his early stuff, and I was stunned at the depth of his experience of Catholicism, because there was so much overlay of cultural stuff that had been given to me, not just cultural stuff from the United States, but from Europe. I mean, it was part of why I walked away from it, because it was just, I couldn't get it sorted out. Where is the heart of the practice, and what is just stuff that's been added for who knows why? And I was really stunned, and I thought, wow, how did he do that? But see, the thing about Merton is that he was a convert. Just like I'm a convert to Buddhism, you know? And so it's easier for us, I think, to sort that out if we have the experience of some of these traditions. It's easier for us to kind of not be so influenced by American culture, to kind of see where the heart of the practice is. Now, you know, one of the reasons why it's so important to me to infuse that into the practice here is because what I was seeing at the time was that people didn't want to experience that. When Katagiri Roshi would say, let's do this, people would say, oh, that's Japanese, but that's not American. And I would see that some of the stuff that he was trying to present to us wasn't just American, it was monastic. I had experienced it in the Catholic convent. And I began to appreciate some of the stuff that I had experienced in the Catholic convent. So this is a lot of what is coming to me now. When I read this thing, if you want to know about your past, look at your mind now. What has this practice, what has my spiritual path offered to me over so many years, over 80 years really, because I was going to church when I was 3 or 4 with my mother. And what is the heart of what I feel in this moment? I was very refreshed in a lot of that by being in Bhutan, even for 12 days, in a 95% Buddhist culture, feeling the influence of it, feeling the effect of it in a kind of a isolated situation. They're very isolated, being surrounded by the Himalayas and not easily able to get out. We flew in, but we flew in right across, across the ocean. So, if you want to know about your past, look at your mind now. If you want to know about your future, look at your mind now. And I'm thinking, in this strategic planning, what I would like to see is to bring forth from each person who has experienced the depth of their practice, either at Great Tree or at some situation, some spiritual situation where they really threw themselves into it, or were thrown into it for whatever reasons. that's the spirit I want to bring forth. The spirit that don't know mind, which brings forth something that we haven't imagined. So maybe I'll stop there. It's 10:47, so we have a little time if anybody has some thoughts about this. One of the things that's driving this, is I just heard this quote from Thich Nhat Hanh, the next Buddha is Sangha. And I mentioned it when Franz was speaking. Was that Kohn? Yeah, he was speaking recently about Sotos in North America. And I've been thinking about Sotos in North America. Delicious. Some of you have heard about it. It's the kind of evolution of what some of us experienced in Japanese practice in our training in Japan or with our Japanese teachers in the United States. Some of the deeper experience that we've had, we're trying to evolve it from a completely Japanese-run American Zen to a completely American-run Zen, Soto Zen, with connections, keeping that relationship with Japan. Because we know that we have a lot to share with each other. American Zen has the inquisitive mind, which is not so present in Japanese Zen. It's much more fixed. I have an article, which I should share with you sometime, about that Katagiri Roshi. It's not an article, it's a talk that he gave in Japan, which was translated, telling Japanese people about his experience of American Zen in San Francisco. And one of the things he said was he was so impressed by the deep aspiration of the people that showed up. It was during the Haight-Ashbury days, so there were a lot of people that were showing up on drugs, and that was a big turnoff for a lot of the Japanese community, which is who he was serving at that time. But Katagiri Roshi was very much of a Zazen person, and so he was impressed by the fact that these young people were showing up and really had a sincere wish to do this practice. And this is what he was expressing in Japan. And so there's this inquisitiveness and this willingness to throw ourselves into the practice in America that is not so common in Japanese culture, even though the spirit of the teaching is embedded in Japanese culture in some ways. So for me, this strategic planning is also a kind of a Sangha building experience. That's what I want it to be. And I'd like to bring in the thoughts and ideas from many people that have practiced here over the last 20 years, including all the people in this room and all the people who are just beginning. As you know, beginner's mind is the most valuable practice in Soto Zen. This don't know mind. And so it's my experiences are really valuable, but my experiences are also not all there is. I don't have beginner's mind anymore. I try, but so do you have any thoughts?
I have a question.
Yeah.
let's say like monastic Sodo Zen, like politics of temples, like will you be replaced by, or would you think you'll be replaced by like an abbot or an abbess, or will they not have that distinction until they get like a mountain seat ceremony? Will they be someone from here or someone from elsewhere, like someone we know or a complete stranger? Do these questions, are they even relevant?
They're totally relevant. And I think for me, this faith that I was talking about, that's not just isolated faith. It's a exploration. It's keeping our eyes open. But to me, this all comes about through the awareness that we cultivate in this practice. Because awareness to me is just noticing what is there. And I think that without this awareness, which is what most of us experience very much in our everyday life, without this kind of awareness, we don't see what is right in front of us, that we always have what we need. But if we're chasing after it, then we don't see what's right there. And so it all goes back to the practice, really, because the Four Noble Truths, if you look at them, the first one is dukkha. And dukkha is basically that feeling of, I'm not enough, or this is not enough, or I have to have something else. And not being able to be present, and not being able to see what is in the present. Not being able to ask ourselves the question, where is my mind now? What is the most important thing to me now? And pursuing that question. I didn't know what Great Tree would be. It's really different from what I imagined. And I love it. I love what it is. But part of it was not being able to put down this vision, because it was just pulling me. And at the same time, accepting again and again this sense of, oh my gosh, it's not working, I failed, we've failed, it's failed. And then recognizing that failure is just attachment to what you think something should be. And when that doesn't happen, then we say we failed. So going forward, the way that I see it is it's partly faith, but it's not just faith. It's because that can be that can be delusion, that is delusion. But it's also recognizing all these ways in which we can explore who would be the next abbess. It needs to be a woman, because this is a women's temple. And right now, there's nobody on the horizon, I would love for it to be Chimyo, but I know I'm going to outlive Chimyo. We've always known that. And physically, she's not in a position to do something like that. But I feel like there's always infinite possibility. And that if we open up our minds and don't say it has to be this way, it has to be this way, I think that's, and accept that it's not happening in the sequence that we would like it to. In Japan, they struggle with the same thing. They have this system of the son taking over the temple, the eldest son. Or if there's not a son, then the daughter. But I know of situations where the eldest son doesn't want to do it, and tries to do his own thing, and the younger son is not ready to do it, not able to do it. So the oldest son has to go back and take it over. Or if there's not somebody to take it over, my teacher's temple, there was no one to take it over. He left. And before he died, when he realized he was dying, he called the teacher, the abbot of the temple nearby, and asked him to take it over. And so person had 2 temples. There's lots of empty temples in Japan. So, that could happen to Great Tree at some point. But I do think that we have created roots. And just the fact that there are people in this room, that there are people taking care of this temple, there are people that are wanting to continue this practice. And as Cohen said, in America, it's really become a lay practice. So what we're talking about in Soto Zen North America is trying to find a way to integrate lay teachers more, recognize lay teachers more. And I've already started to do it, but 2 of them are taking care of Zen Center of Asheville. One of them is taking care of the Charlotte Zen Meditation Society. And one of them is Nancy Spence from Natsatamaga, and she's got her own community, and I'm perfectly comfortable with having a lay teacher take over Great Tree. And the mountain seat ceremony is just a way of saying to the community, hey, this is now who's taking over. But ultimately, it comes down to the community kind of making that decision. And what I'd like to do right now is I'd like to set up kind of a practice council of people that are interested in taking care of the practice. When Katagiri Roshi died, we had a practice council in Minnesota. And it was really good that we did, because we weren't expecting him to die so young. But this practice council was able to take up the practice questions about how to go forward. And so I think this is a good thing to have. We need to look at what kind of people do we need to have to take care of the temple in the event that I should die tomorrow, something like that. And maybe to make that decision about who will be the next abbess. It could be somebody that I recommend. It could be somebody that shows up out of the blue. It could be one of my reincarnated dogs.
Exciting.
What?
Exciting.
Yeah. Somebody actually wrote a poem about my dog Daisy, who died here, and about this dog Daisy coming back coming back to Great Tree and practicing here. Any other? Yes.
Can you talk more about the beginner's mind and what you mean about that?
A beginner's mind means that, there's a book called Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. It's a series of lectures by Shunryu Suzuki Roshi, that is responsible for starting San Francisco Zen Center. And in it, he says, in the mind of a beginner, there are many possibilities. In the mind of the expert, there are few. And so, this beginner's mind is the mind that doesn't have some idea and is not attached to some idea about how things should be. And so, and this is really American Zen has a lot of beginner's mind, which Japanese Soto Zen not so much. But when we have beginner's mind, we have that ability to see what is right in front of us, really. When I first started Zen meditation, I had no interest in being part of a group or anything. I just thought I needed some space in my life, and that meditation would create that space. And so when I sat down, I thought, I'm just going to see what happens when I sit here. And if it's something valuable, then I'll keep doing it, and if not, So I really did have that beginner's mind without even realizing it. And the practice of Soto Zen is called shikantaza. And shikantaza means just sit. And my teacher used to say, just wholeheartedly sit. It means wholeheartedly sit. And who said? Suzuki Roshi says, shikantaza means to do nothing. Or someone said that. I think it was Suzuki Roshi, or maybe it was my teacher in Japan. It means to do nothing. Shikantaza means to do nothing. And so I describe it as to, at first you have to resist that tendency to do something. Yeah. So that's how I describe shikantaza. Because our mind wants to do something, so it's always thinking. But when we sit there and we notice that, when we sit there and we don't, with the idea of not doing anything, and our mind is still thinking, we get involved in these thoughts, and then we notice it. And it kind of helps us to kind of not get so engaged in those thoughts. It helps us to see how we grasp. And then we're not so inclined to continue to grasp in that way. It kind of, little by little, we kind of say, that's not so important. And that, it doesn't just happen on the cushion. It starts to happen in our everyday life. We notice how we grasp. We notice, So that shikantaza, or doing nothing, is really the opportunity to notice. And at those moments when we notice, that's really letting go. It's really letting go. And of course, we re-engage again. But just having those moments of letting go is to experience life as it is, which is we're connected. And it's a real experience. We don't recognize it because it's not so familiar until we've done it for a while. So that beginner's mind is the same as shikantaza. It's not to have something that we expect. Because Zazen is not what we expect. I thought when I sat down I'd immediately feel peaceful. And, it's a process of recognizing the things that we do that create lack of peace. So, does that help?
Very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, don't know. And this teacher, Sansanim, used to say, only don't know. Anything else?
I'm just appreciating the history. Like when I hear that, like it's been nice to be kind of new here and to kind of enter into it and just kind of really bow my head into this, into how this is and how it is here. Because there's something really steadying about knowing the history. Like if I just stay quiet and be like, oh, that's got something behind it. It almost feels like I can lean on that a little bit. Like, oh, I'm not lost out into trying to figure it out or anything. I can steady myself. Like if this has the memory of being a tree, like I can literally like lean on that and it will hold me. So there's something just for me personally that's really touching and really steadying about hearing the history. It like brings me into like how much is actually holding this here, how like deep those roots are. So thank you for bringing me in. It's really helping me.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, there is, isn't there? And some of it is the tradition, and some of it is just the spirit that has been brought to this by so many people for 20 years, 20 plus years, really. Yeah, thank you. The fact that it's here. And that the mortgage is paid. Hallelujah. But there's still a vision. There's still, I've envisioned a residency here. So, and I'm not going to talk anymore because it's 11:06. So we need to continue our day. So thank you all for being here and listening to it.
Okay, I'm going to make some announcements. Hold on here just a second. So there is family meditation tomorrow at 10:30, and the theme of it is Sangha, sitting, sharing, and Samu. Tomorrow there will also be like a work day that will start at 10 as well. So the kids will help with some of it, which will be really cute. So there's like a 10 to noon work period. Then from noon to 1 there will be lunch, and then from 1 to 3 there will be like a second work period, and then we'll conclude with tea. And like the tasks that we're thinking about doing are kind of like mowing, trimming, raking, picking up sticks, gardening, just general kind
Digging
of
out giant burdock
digging up burdock, all that kind of stuff.
so it's not
Cleaning
stuck
the
all over
temple.
us.
It's kind of rainy, so maybe mowing won't happen. But anyway, there's lots of things to do. There will also be another volunteer work day on June 7th that will have the same exact structure. So if you're going to come, just let me know. Send me an email at info@greattreetemple.org. Some other upcoming events. On June 6th, Dr. Lai, who runs Urban Dharma, the Tibetan Center that's in on Haywood, on June 6th, he will be giving a Dharma talk here about the Wesak Buddha Day ceremony. And then after that afternoon at 2 p.m., there will be a Wesak ceremony at Urban Dharma. So come to that will be fun. I also want to remind people of the June practice period, which starts June 15th to July 17th. It will be kind of a continuation of the same book, but a different section. And then lastly, two more things. One is the family retreat. I'm going to keep that on people's calendars from June 14th, 12th through 14th. And then next weekend, from May 29th to June 3rd, there will be a session, which I think is the last session before the summer. So that was a lot, but just if you have any questions about any of that, just email me, info@greattreetemple.org.
Okay, good. Thank you.
We'll give back the merit since the call and response. May the merit of this practice.
May the merit of this practice
benefit all beings.
benefit all beings
And bring peace.
and bring peace.
Now I'll do 3 bows and we'll have the exit bells. See, that's what you sound like when you do that.